Welcome to One Insight. My name is Litvin. I grew up in London and I now live in LA. And this is a podcast for extraordinary top performers. You see, I've coached some of the most successful and talented people on the planet. I see what most people cannot see, and I dare to say what most people wouldn't dare to say. And what I know about success is that on the other side of it, it can actually be lonely. You can feel like more of an imposter the more successful you become. And when you're the most interesting person in the room, you're actually in the wrong room. I coach around insight. Life looks one way, something happens, the world looks different, and your entire world changes. It can happen in an instant. And this podcast is called One Insight because a single insight can change everything. I think you're going to enjoy this episode. Andre's got a background. He built a healthcare business from scratch to 6 figures. Then he built a successful coaching business after that. He works in the healthcare field. When I coach him, I don't quite get what his first question is, so I dive deeper. What do you really want is always the heart of what I'm asking. And I start to find out what this man is about. And then I dive deeper. And I use the metaphor of writing a book as a way to coach him. And we get somewhere really powerful. Just a few minutes in, the power of coaching around insight is you don't need a lot of time. When they have the insight, they're there. Sometimes it's time to take them off the hot seat. But I decided to leave Andre on the hot seat just a little bit longer, and we really get there. And this is a man now who's filled with energy, ready to make a big impact in the world in a way that scares him just a little bit, which is a place I always love. Enjoy. Hi, Andre.
Hi, Rich. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for saying yes to joining me on my podcast today. We call this podcast One Insight for a reason. In my experience, that the power of coaching is in a single insight, and life is one way, and then you have an insight, and suddenly life is very different. So let's see what occurs in our time together. What would really be valuable for you today in our coaching?
So yeah, I think I've been sort of chasing my tail rather over the last sort of 2 or 3 years around taking what I do as a therapist, physical therapist, energy therapist, coach, whatever, and working out what my service is and what's the greater thing for the world, right? That's the real big thing for me, is like, how can I've been happy to build sort of businesses and serve one client at a time and a local thing, but what's my bigger mission? What's my bigger game to play? I sort of feel I'm still playing a little bit small.
Because you've got an interesting track record behind you. Just remind me of the things you've done in the past.
So yeah, so my history, initially I was an osteopath, and I built a business sort of to being an osteopath from 2001 to about 2010, 2011, and then started to do sort of more energy work, and so kept on building that as well. So taking a lot of my physical therapy clients into energy work, and then 2015-ish, 2016, decided to start adding coaching into there as well. And then sort of having a hybrid of body work, of energy work, of coaching, and really working with people around mental and emotional and physical health and well-being. That was my big thing, but more mental and emotional over the last sort of 2 years. I worked with a lot of people with anxiety, with stress, depression, and trauma. So trauma is my big sort of my study over the last 8 years is trauma.
Oh, okay. So thank you. That's now we're starting to narrow in on what this is. So you had a really successful practice you built up into a big business originally around being an osteopath. That went into more therapeutic work. Now coaching too. It's all part of it. Just really serving your clients, right?
Yeah. And then that's just morphed into this more sort of fluid thing.
Yeah. So what would make this magical? I still haven't got a sense of. If this was a magical conversation and we got off this call, and either in the minutes that followed or the months that followed, or even in 3 years' time, you call me up and say, "Oh my gosh, Rich, life is amazing." What would you be telling me?
It would be that bigger mission. It would be that, I think I attended one of your events, as we mentioned previously, briefly off camera, and the moonshot, I think we talked about.
Yeah.
You talked about the moonshot, and that's really sort of, you know, what's my bigger game to play? You know, what if I was going to look back and do the old, you know, the funeral, and wanting someone to sort of speak at my funeral, what would they be saying about my contribution to the health space, health and wellness particularly?
Well,
that's my passion.
So tell me, what would they be saying?
I almost led myself into that.
Yeah.
That I made a difference. That I made a difference around mental and emotional health feels that sort of area, and how people can fully integrate. Not necessarily it's not about big trauma, but it's about the general traumatic sort of general life trauma that we develop, and how we can go inwards and really resource ourselves to make massive changes, and how I can teach that to a much broader audience than just my one-to-one. You know, so
you said something very interesting to me just then. What I heard is this: if I understand the world of trauma, I think of people who've served in the military. I think of people who've been in massive accidents. I think of terrorist situations. And that's where PTSD, massive trauma. But what I just heard from you is this concept of life trauma. Yeah. And it makes me think, yeah, we're traumatized all the time. Those things our parents said to us when we were a child that impacts us decades yet later. The thing that a partner said in a relationship, an old boss, someone who bullied us when we were a kid, like there's trauma in micro doses constantly throughout our lives.
Microtrauma is a great way for it. I call it little t trauma. So trauma with a little t. You know, trauma with a big T is the big car crashes and the big PTSD, the war veterans, and that's very, very worthy work, and people are doing amazing work in that field, and that's not my field. My field is more subtle. It's working with the micro trauma, with the little t trauma, and the big T when it comes up. But it's like getting people to understand. So every day I'll hear someone say in my work, I'll hear a client say, "Oh, but I haven't got anything to complain about because my childhood wasn't that bad, or my relationships when I was growing up weren't that bad, so I've got nothing to complain about." And yet I'm sitting here, they're sitting there, you know, full of anxiety, full of stress, full of overwhelm, and trying to make them understand that the link back to there. It doesn't have to have been overwhelming. It doesn't have to have been, you know, significant. You know, everyone sort of says, "Oh, but there are so many worse people in the world." But we're living our own experience, right? We're living our experience in the moment today, and we can only be who we are. We can't be referencing our lives to somebody else, and all these sort of little micro things that happen to us all add up to create this person that's sat in front of me, and that feels to me, I feel like there's insight in there. And
what else do you hear from your clients? It was powerful when you said, "I've got nothing to complain about." Almost like they're embarrassed to sit in front of you. What else? What other things do you hear them say?
That they really should be able to get their own way. They should be able to find their own way out of it. You know, they've got nothing to complain about. Their childhood was good. Their life has not really had any major sort of issues, and that they should be able to find their way out on their own. They shouldn't need other people's support. And yet they get stuck. Particularly men, maybe more than women to a point, partly, but it's still for both.
It relates to something that's been present for me for a long time. I don't need help. I did a speech on this idea of I don't need help.
Absolutely, and that's it. It's like my life is not. I think there's almost a guilt. You know, we look around the world and we see, you know, the news bombards us all the time, and why should we complain about our lives? And then when we look at that, we feel guilty for asking for help because we think, "Oh well, what have I got to complain about? Why should I? You know, I've got to get on with this myself and work it out because there are so much other suffering around the world. How can I be so selfish as to say that my lack of connection with my mother has caused me to be, difficult in relationships or whatever?"
I love the idea, Andre, of I've supported so many clients who are writing a book right now. For me, the purpose of writing a book is not a book as a place to get to, as in how many copies can I sell? Will I be an Amazon bestseller? Can I get on the New York Times bestseller list? I'm less interested in that than what's the book you need to write? And it's the book that speaks to your clients, this language that they're saying, so that they feel this when they pick it up. Like, oh my God, this man is speaking to me. These are the voices in my head.
Yeah.
Now, I saw you smile when I first mentioned a book. Tell me what the reaction was.
Okay. So this is the unfair thing to drop into the middle of a coaching conversation. There's actually a back narrative to something that happened to me 6 months ago, which was that out of nowhere I developed, well, it wasn't out of nowhere, but I developed a heart condition which my father had very similar age. He had heart issues, and I had this scare around my heart, and the thing that came up after that, I had some treatment, and it's all good. But the thing that came after that was the book. This book concept came up, which was around the heart, the heart of a father, the heart of I've got a daughter, and the traumatic. So my father was actually taken off. I live in Guernsey in the Channel Islands, and my father was taken off the island at the age of 2 when the Germans occupied us, and so occupied the islands, and so I felt that there was some connection with him. There was some sort of thing that he couldn't quite fully be present for me, and I feel that there's a connection between these little traumas, these bigger traumas, my life. I think this heart thing, although it's partly a health thing, but I think it's also an emotional, a mental, an epigenetic sort of link. So there was this grand vision sitting, coming out of hospital and thinking, that's the grand opus. That's like writing a book around the heart from a male perspective, from a perspective of being a son, a perspective of being a father, perspective of being a healer. And yeah, I can sense myself welling at that. It's sort of like a little thing in my chest there, in my throat. So.
Good. Well, let yourself feel it. You're feeling it in your heart right now, literally. So and that's great. For me, tears are a sign of release of emotion, and there's some freedom on the other side of that. And look, you said earlier, what would people say, if I'd passed away? It becomes very real when you get a scare like that, right? You're suddenly very aware of your own mortality.
Yeah, yeah.
So then we start
and aware of the fear of your family and the fear of people around. You get a sense of their fear for worry about yourself, and then they also get a sense of how much love there is and how much sort of support, and that in some ways drops away some of the other concerns. And you suddenly focus on what's really important, and so that's all in that narrative. That whole thing.
Well, so let me ask you, because what my favorite question to ask after I've brought in this concept of a book and someone gets in touch with it like you have, is then I ask, well, let's say you'd written that book. It's done, it's complete. What's the book you'd write then? Or what's the book that would scare you to write?
Taking ownership of my understanding of, there's taking ownership of my deeper understanding of how we're born as these little energetic beings, and our life experiences, I call them undigested life experiences. Undigested life experiences never fully pass through. We never fully digest these things, and they stay stuck in the body. They stay stuck in the energy system, and I have a real deep knowledge of that, and how that links in with trauma, and how that links in with spiritual development, and how that links in with the whole piece. And I own it in secret, and I own it with my groups, and I own it one-to-one. And I would be petrified of owning it out there on, people saying, but that on page 72 you said this, and that's actually not completely correct, and So let yourself feel this that you're feeling, that little smile on your face in this moment. So this is the one, right? And the first book you mentioned, you know how to write that one, but that's not difficult to write. Have to be the one that comes next. Like, this is the one. And I get it. I understand. If you've followed me for a while, you know that 3 years ago, I started talking about the second book I wanted to put out there in the world. This was my book. There was no co-author to this one. This is my book about the kind of powerful people that I work with, the clients I spend time with. And I was terrified because I was now thinking, well, my original audience might not like it. The new audience won't know it. My first book sold over 55,000 copies. So this one's never going to reach that. I got completely into my head around this.
And so I speak from that experience of understanding the fear of getting this out there into the world. And this is no one else can speak this. Like I heard 2 examples of trauma. You talked about life trauma and legacy trauma.
Yeah.
This trauma that stretches back through generations, right? I remember my wife, she has a master's in spiritual psychology, had to create a family tree as part of her project, and not just track back the members of her family, but the trauma in her family, the mindsets in her family. You can track this back for generations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's part of the work I do. Yeah. Yeah.
So I had this vision of a book. Sometimes a title pops for me, and initially I was thinking this title of the word guilty on the front cover. But then now I'm wondering, is it the word trauma on the front cover? There's something like that just grabs people. And then you start to share your story. And then there's more than one element, right? There is a place where there might be one chapter that talks about the massive trauma. You deal with this when needed, PTSD and so on. But this is a small part of this. Most of the book is about, and I love chapter titles to be the language of my people. So my childhood wasn't that bad. It's an awesome chapter title.
Yeah.
Because your people are going to, that's me. I've got, oh my God, that's me. I should be able to find my way out. I've got this. I don't need help. Like, this is the language of your people. They're the chapter titles.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah, it really is. Yeah, and that does feel great, because that is, I'm still, the heart thing, I'm still hiding away slightly. Like I can write a thing that is, yeah, it's great and it's engaged and it's personal. Really interesting, isn't it? It's a personal story that I'll be happy to tell, but taking extreme ownership of my conceptual frameworks is difficult. That's where I put my head really out and say, actually, I do know something of what I'm talking about. So it's not a personal story. A personal story, someone can't tell you you're wrong. No, that's my personal story. But they can tell you the challenge is when you're doing something that's sort of about something you're deeply passionate about. You have an understanding that you've never learned from books, or it's just, it's personal experience. It's learning from teachers and mentors and masters and clients, learning from thousands and thousands of clients.
So look, Andre, I said at the beginning, before we began, the reason I call this podcast One Insight is sometimes you get the insight and you're there. And the temptation for a coach is to keep diving deeper and deeper. Sometimes in that moment when you're there, the best thing a coach can do is take the client off the hot seat.
Yeah.
Now, this is a hot seat moment. And I have a couple of other thoughts behind that I think might serve you. But I want to bookmark this moment because we're actually there. This is it. I'm not trying to coach you around this. How do we turn this into a 17-step plan? How do we get you doing this? How do we hold you accountable? I'm not an accountability coach. I say to my clients, if you need accountability, you haven't got a mission that's important enough to you or big enough for you yet.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree with that.
And I sense we're there. I think I could take you off the hot seat and you've got this. Whether or not you make anything happen yet is fine. 3 years into me wrestling with all the self-doubt around my second book, and I'm committed this year. This is the year it's coming out. But I needed those 3 years. And here's the thing. Here's why I'm going to keep you on the hot seat a bit longer. I love the book by Austin Kleon called Show Your Work. I didn't sit for 3 years trying to either hide away in my room, write the perfect book showing nobody until it was perfect, or sit full of self-doubt and self-deprecation and hide away and do nothing. I wrote and I shared it. I have an audience, I have a blog, I talk to my clients, I sent emails out to the people who follow me in my community, and I shared my insights along the way. And I got feedback and I saw what hit and what didn't. And some people liked it, some people didn't. Some of them were not my people and they drifted away. But I kept showing my work in all of its messiness. And so when I sat down to write chapter 1 in January of this year, I was astounded initially because it poured out of me. And then I realized, because I've been writing it for 3 years.
Yeah. So
my encouragement for you is don't try and sit in a room and get this perfect. And don't sit with all your self-doubt and wondering, will people like it? Will people hate it? What shall I do? Start sharing it. Even if it's just to your community. You've got an amazing community. Share it with them. Here are my thoughts. Here's version 1. Here's this. And see what happens along the way.
Love it. Yeah, yeah. No, and it does, and it's what it is for me. It's combining it's finding my voice, because what I talk about and how I talk about it isn't conventional. I'm not coming from a conventional. I'm mixing science and chat. A casual way of taking science and trauma and spirituality and mixing them together. So it's finding that voice, and I think that's probably what I would not trust initially. I remember Will Self said, "You got to get your first 100,000 words out of your brain," and I think.
Yeah, I was lucky. I was told by a very successful blogger years ago when I first started blogging that almost every successful blogger he knew hated their first 50 posts and didn't find their voice until they'd written 100 posts.
Yeah, and
I smiled because it was like, oh, great, let me just get them out the way. If you
Yeah.
look at the early videos, you can find them of me on YouTube. I was so nervous and insecure. And now people say, wow, you're so comfortable on camera. Well, because I practiced. And so let go of the need to edit as you write, just write. Your voice will come. You have a powerful message and you have a powerful mission. Your voice will come along the journey. And I love, you talk about this mixture of science and chat and spirituality. That's going to make this book really unique, Andre. And most people, the insidious thing about Facebook is it's trained us to get likes. And likes don't do anything. You want people who love you or people who can't stand you. Those people are gone. They're not your people. Yeah. And the ones who love you, the reason my community has grown by word of mouth is the people who are not into me just slip away. And the ones who love me follow me more and more and get more involved. That's what you want. I'm not the right taste for everybody, and I don't try to be. Now, I'm human, and there's a very human part that I want to touch on before we finish. Throughout human history, Andre, if you spoke up, if you spoke your truth, if you put your voice into the world, someone will probably try and fight you and might kill you. Your tribe might ostracize you and then you would die. People misunderstand when we hear this phrase that people are more afraid of public speaking than of death. No, what that means is we actually believe that if we speak in public, we'll die. It's very human, innate in our system. Talk about a legacy trauma, right?
Yeah,
most of human history, you spoke up, you died. This isn't a book that's likely to end in your death. It might, and I say this with my tongue in my cheek, but only slightly. In fact, I hope that some people don't like you because of this book. I hope you piss some people off because of this book. Your job is not to be liked. Your job is to put your message out there and find your people where it can really serve.
Love it. Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. Thank you, Rich. It's brilliant. Awesome.
Thank you, Andre. For most of human history, it wasn't called coaching. It was called leadership. And it's what I love to do, to coach people, to lead people, and to mess with people's thinking. If you'd like more of this, or if you'd like to learn more about our community of extraordinary top performers, go to richlitvin.com/oneinsight.